alive. Tank alive.
Afternoon, so they born accident. What afternoon? And this was roundabout.
If you have been asking the question, Reverend Roland, how did you get into this Ambazonia case? Why are you interested about this Ambazonia case? Why do you talk so much about the leaders? It is very important that today I explain to you exactly how I got involved. I was in school pursuing my MBA with a concentration in finance. In one of our classes, we were asked to write a paper on corporate social responsibility. So I was wondering where I'll get the data to write about corporate social responsibility. It's rather unfortunate there were not much peer review papers about Cameroon on this subject. And so I started searching from other African countries, and I came across a very interesting case in Nigeria. The Niger Delta oil crisis with Shell Company, the UK Shell Company. It indicates that Shell started extracting oil in Nigeria in 1958, and they have been doing that till today. That is approximately 66 years. It got me intrigued. One of the fascinating things about that story is the inhabitants of the Niger Delta area are not benefiting from this oil. And not only that, the oil spills, and so the inhabitants in that local area, they cannot have good drinking water. Their crops are being destroyed. Their homes are being destroyed. And so they filed a lawsuit against the Shell Royal Company. That story changed everything for me about the Ambazonia crisis. Then I went into Cameroon and started looking at the data as to the current crisis that we are dealing with. And then I look at the area where the oil is being extracted in Cameroon. I didn't see that much harm done to the inhabitants of that area in Cameroon compared to Nigeria. I started doing some research about the demography, the age groups in Cameroon, and I realized that 42% of Cameroonians are between 0 to 14 years of age. I started realizing that, something is off here. Just about 5 to 7% of Cameroonians are above the age of 65. The life expectancy of the average Cameroonian is approximately 61 years. That got me intrigued, because this is how you solve problems. Data doesn't lie, right? There's always quantitative and qualitative data. So I started listening to those talking about the Ambazonian crisis, and I realized a sharp contrast. Those below the age of 40 were talking more about, we don't have a job, we need a job, we want a change in the current regime, while those above that age were talking about resources. They were talking about 1961, they were talking about the banks that were closed, they were talking about the factories that were closed. And then I realized that there is a distinction between those above the age of 40 and those below the age of 40. So I thought to myself, based on my studies, that I'll separate these two groups and listen to them differently. And that is what I've been doing on this platform. And if you observe, I said this platform was designed for Cameroonians below the age of 40. something interesting happened along the way when I started putting this data together, because I'm like, look at these young people. Approximately 75% of Cameroonians are below the age of 40. This is a young, vibrant population that are being misguided by this older generation. This got me intrigued, and that is how I got involved. Along the way, my father-in-law got kidnapped by the Ambazonian forces, and they were demanding for ransom. And in that process, we started listening to the grievances of these young men who held my father-in-law in their custody, and we realized that what they were seeking for was jobs, a better life in Cameroon. None of them said anything about 1961. None of them said anything about the banks and the factories that was closed. And then it got me thinking. I said, if your problem is jobs, if your problem is a better life in Cameroon, we can fix that. If we do things a certain way, we can fix that. And that is why I started putting up a plan on how to solve this problem, so that we can be able to address the economic crisis, the job crisis in Cameroon. Looking at this data of this demography of people and what they really need, 75% below the age of 40. The first step to solving any problem is to ask yourself the question, is there anyone else that has gone through a similar problem like the one I'm dealing with, right? If you figure out someone that has gone through a similar crisis, it is easy for you to solve that problem, because at least you get a prototype, you get something that you can work with. This is what we do even in data research. It is easy for you to be able to come up with a solution when you find a model. So I started reading and digging into history, looking at other countries and other civilizations and other nations going way back as the 14th century. And then I began to realize that France and Britain were colonized by the Romans themselves. Britain was colonized by the Romans for approximately 367 years. France was colonized by the same Romans for approximately 500 years. So these nations got their independence from Rome. And then they were able to build themselves into a superpower. The question is, how did they do that? They united. France had tribes, more than 60 tribes. They had to unite. Britain had approximately 30 tribes. They had to unite. One common denominator is that they adopted Christianity as a common religion. They were able to dissolve their tribes, come together as one, in spite their differences, and they were able to create a monarchy. And through that, they were able to make progress really fast, significantly. Before Britain and France came to us, we were inhabitants of that geographical location. And after it left, we have a nation called Cameroon. The question we should ask ourselves is, are we going to get stuck on the legacy of the colonial masters, or are we going to come together as a people in this geographical location and figure out what works so that we can be able to build our country? Those are some questions that I outlined and studied and was able to come up with a hypothesis as to how we can make progress. Does this make sense? Another great nation that I admire so much, and I've studied their principles, their philosophies, their progress over time, is America, where I live. It indicates that America was not this beautiful, wealthy, prosperous nation from the onset. Why is America great today? The beauty of America is its diversity. There are individuals here that come from every background. They can call America home. It's very important to underscore that America had some struggles in the beginning. Under the leadership of George Washington, America was able to unite. The 13 colonies came together. When they got their independence from Britain, because Britain colonized America as well, So when people are telling you La Republic colonized us, all of this a false narrative. It's not realistic. Do you understand what I'm saying? So one thing that I realized was after America got their independence from Britain, the 13 colonies did not align under a unanimous vision. Under the leadership of George Washington, America was able to come together. The 13 colonies came together. They had different ideas, different philosophies, different objectives as to how that union would look like, just like us in Cameroon. Are you seeing a model now? So that was a model that I started studying based on the crisis that we are dealing with in Cameroon. One thing that I realized was there were groups within America at that time that were marginalized, like the black people. Some of them were slaves, or if not, most of them were slaves at the time. George Washington, the leader who emerged to unite these 13 colonies, had slaves himself. But over time, he began to feel like this practice is wrong and we have to abolish it. So he actually laid the groundwork for someone like Abraham Lincoln. The reason why I'm sharing this is to help us understand that every nation has a challenge. The fact that those in the Niger Delta area don't have complete control over their oil and is being controlled by the federal government in Nigeria tells me that the case in Cameroon cannot be completely defined as marginalization when it comes to that oil. When they talk about banks and factories being closed in the Anglophone zone by the government, the reality is most companies that were being run during the colonial era also faced a similar challenge post-independence. And this is a very, very vital point that should be underscored as well. Now, there are different factors that we have to consider when we are blaming the government as the cause of these institutions going bankrupt or being closed. If someone says the reason why those factories were closed is because of government intervention, what you should do as a smart and learned individual is ask the individual who is claiming that the government shut down these institutions to provide for you data on the past 5 years or the 5 years leading to the closure of this bank, leading to the closure of these factories. If we can be able to study that data, we will understand if the closure of those factories or the banks was 100% as a result of government intervention. Without that, you cannot just come up with a hypothesis that the government shut the bank, because we've studied that data and realized some people borrowed money from that bank and did not give it back. Some people borrowed money even in the name of their dead relatives. A lot went on just with the closure of that bank, and we have to examine that data. Without that, we don't have a case that we can deal with. And these are realities. This is how you judge a case. This is how you make sense of your reality. When it comes to jobs, I just want to let our people understand that minority individuals face challenges in every community that they find themselves. We live in a nation where it is 80% French and 20% English. The reality is, if you want a job within that country and you don't speak French, you will face a challenge. It is not discrimination, because majority of this population will want individuals that speak French. Because you cannot travel to Douala, you cannot travel to maybe Yaoundé or Betua and teach geography in English. You have to teach in French, because the inhabitants of that area do speak French. So those who never took French classes serious, guess what? They will have a hard time getting a job in Cameroon. So if you did study French, you can travel anywhere in Cameroon and you can be able to take advantage of the opportunities within your country. I hope this makes sense. And this is how I started shifting my perspective, even though I grew up my entire life believing the stories that I was told. But through the classes that I took in school in finance, it helped me to understand that you don't just look at an economic crisis and you say it is because of government. You have to look at the data. Writing that paper on corporate social responsibility with my case study being the Niger Delta oil crisis with the Shell Royal Company changed everything for me. This is what in-depth research and studies will do for you. Now, What is the way forward? I want to help us have perspective. America came together, kicked out the colonial master, Britain. Individuals in other colonies within America wanted to have their separate countries, just like what we are doing in Cameroon right now. Under the leadership of George Washington, he united the 13 colonies into what we call America today. The staggering thing about it is they found a way to compromise in that process. Because if everyone wanted to do things their way, it would have been tough for these colonies to come together. Today, America predominantly speaks English. America predominantly is a Christian nation. It doesn't mean that other languages or other groups don't exist within America, but predominantly America speaks English. And if we want to make progress, this is how we look at our story. We should be able to compromise to an extent if we really want peace. Seeing what is happening in our country, look at our young men. They are just shooting in space. It's not like you see the military that they are fighting, but rather they are just shooting in empty space. This indicates they are probably struggling with some schizophrenic illusion. And this might be as a result of maybe overconsumption of drugs. And this is what is actually happening. What is the way forward for us? It's a good question we should all ask. We came up with CSDP, the Cameroon Sustainable Development Project, studied other nations and what they did to elevate their country out of poverty. And this is predicated on the assumption that those who are below the age of 40, who make up approximately 75% of Cameroon, can be able to work extremely hard and prosper themselves economically in the next 20 years. So before they turn 60, they can be able to make significant progress in their lives if we all unite. China took a similar path. They were practicing communism. Under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, they realized that this communism thing is gonna eat them up. He came to America, saw what was going on, went back to China, reformed their economic policy. He made this very important statement. It doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white. As long as it can catch a mice, it is a good cat. That means it doesn't matter whether capitalism comes from the West or comes from America. If it can solve the economic crisis that we are dealing with in China, we will adopt the system. Today, when you look at China, people think China practices communism. No, it is a mixture of capitalism and communism. Communism is at the level of some major companies within China that are being led by the government. We do buy products from China, and I will tell you that most of the Chinese people do practice capitalism. Now, China had a GDP of approximately 390 billion US dollars in 1990. Today, China's GDP is approximately 17 trillion US dollars. They've made significant progress over the span of 34 years. And that is modeling what works. That is simply what China did. China modeled what works. South Korea is another interesting case study. And what did South Korea do? South Korea specialized. They specialize in key industries. And because of that, they made significant progress. And today their GDP is approximately 1.6 trillion US dollars. A very poor nation like South Korea have been able to lift themselves out of poverty because they specialized. This is how I formulated my thought. If we can model what works, and if we do specialize, we can make significant progress in the next 20 years. And that is where my hypothesis about our developmental project emerged. If we focus on 7 key industries that are transforming the global economy in the next 20 years, we can be able to move our GDP to 1 trillion US dollars. Now our GDP is approximately 45 billion US dollars. But if we do focus and specialize, we can be able to make significant progress. If we adopt capitalism, if we believe in God, and if we specialize, if we unite, we will be able to reach this goal in the next 20 years. Now, the industries that are looked at that are transforming the global economy and they make the most millionaires are agriculture, finance, tech, real estate and construction, healthcare, renewable energy, the media and entertainment industry. These industries are changing the world today. And if we focus on these 7 key industries in the next 20 years, we can be able to elevate our country out of poverty. Now, the staggering thing is, how do we get out of this thinking that we should secede, just like the colonies in America thought after they got their independence from Britain? We have to understand that there is unity in diversity is a strength and not a weakness. And we should be able to compromise in the process. The Anglophones should understand that approximately 80% of the country speaks French. We should be able to compromise. I'm not saying we lay down English, because I think it's a great asset for the entire nation. If you look closely, most of our French brothers and sisters, they are studying English now, including the president's daughter. That tells you that they do understand the value of this language. Now, what is my suggestion? We have to find a way to be one, just like America did. Be one, be united, integrate perfectly before we talk of federation. And the reason is, the judicial system practiced in America is the common law system. The judicial system practiced in Britain and France is the civil law system. It is very important that these distinctions are very minute compared to the lives that we've seen being lost, right? We should be able to compromise in certain areas if we want to make progress. And studying French, learning how to speak French is going to help you as an Anglophone to take advantage of the opportunities within that country. When we have numbers, it is strength. It is not a weakness. Why? We do speak English and we do speak French. This is what this can do for us. We can leverage economic opportunities within Cameroon, and we can also leverage economic opportunities in other countries within Africa and in other countries abroad that speak English and French. This is the opportunity that we do have. Now, you should be asking yourself the question, why did you say this organization is designed for Cameroonians below the age of 40? Like I said, I had to separate these two groups of people, make sense of their specific grievances so that we can be able to prescribe a solution that will work for everybody. Our organization is for every Cameroonian. Every Cameroonian that wants unity, that wants peace, that wants development for that nation. You are welcome on this platform. Now that we do understand exactly what is going on, that those below the age of 40, what they really want is economic development. They want peace, they want unity, they want change, they want a better life for themselves, they want to expand their scope. And then it is important that what this younger generation want is very important than what this older generation want. I'm not minimizing what the older generation are seeking for, but what I'm saying is, if this younger generation pursue their goal, they will be able to take care of this older generation in the next 20 years. This is a strategic economic plan. And for those who thought, oh, you're a pastor, you should not talk about those things. Oh, you are a pastor, you should stay on your lane. And I just want to say, I did not just study theology, I also studied business. And if you look at that Bible closely, Joseph is a strategic business consultant. He became the governor of Egypt because of his consulting services that he rendered to Pharaoh, and let him know that in the next 7 years we are going to have surplus, so we should save, because the next 7 years afterwards we are going to have famine. So if we preserve the surplus, guess what? We will have food for the 7 years of famine. And that strategic advice changed everything for Egypt and the surrounding nations. So it is very, very important that we understand that even in the Bible, these are principles that we don't just read them as an economist. We don't just read them as some stories to enjoy and shout on the pulpit, but we look at these stories as something very important to explore and be able to solve economic challenges within our nation. Let's push for unity. Let's integrate perfectly. I know the benefit that will come with this in the next 100, 200 years. America, regardless of what you think about this nation, is the most prosperous nation on earth. No matter the country you find yourself in, Europe or in Asia, everyone's dream is to come to America. America works because, in spite of the diversity, they figure out a way to unite. You look at President Joe Biden. When Donald Trump was shot, he stepped down and he condemned that act. And he said, no matter what we do with politics, there is no place in America for violence. And I think we should adopt a similar principle in Cameroon. This is how we learn really fast. This is how we make significant progress. What I'm sharing with you here is what will work for us in the next 100 years, in the next 200 years, if we genuinely want change in our lives as Anglophones, in our lives as Francophones in Cameroon. There are a lot of opportunities we can take advantage of, but only if we unite. We cannot fight and kill one another over the colonial heritage that we harbor. It is unrealistic in this dispensation. Given the opportunities that we have at our disposal, we can make significant progress if we unite. If you like this video and you want to watch another one, click right here. If you want to watch the entire video, click right here.